Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining today. My name is Dan Maloof, Senior Director of Product here at Eins. Excited to be hosting this week's tech briefing. As usual, for the folks on the line, the purpose of these 30-minute briefings is for our rotating cast of Eins faculty members to dive into the relevant InfoSec news stories of the week and provide you with specific, actionable guidance to take back to your teams. With that as a backdrop, thrilled to be joined today by two of our Eins faculty rock stars, Dave Shackelford and Jessica Hebenstreet. Dave is the founder and principal consultant with Voodoo Security, an information security consulting firm. And Jessica is the director of security operations and infrastructure at Aptura, a global work tech company. Dave, Jessica, thanks so much for joining.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, good stuff.
With that, let's dive into the agenda for today. Packed agenda, meaty topics, as Jessica and I were talking about a little bit. But first, we have to discuss the BlackCat ransomware attack against Change Healthcare, which is putting pharmacies and healthcare organizations in turmoil for the past week or so. We'll dive into that and some lessons we can take from there. After that, we're going to dive into the iSoon leak, which sort of put a spotlight on China's hackers for hire system that they got going over there. So maybe, dive a little bit into what that leak showed and kind of, some takeaways for the folks here. And then finally, NIST released CSF 2.0. So we'll talk takeaways and potential action items for security teams around that as well. So obviously a lot to cover today. We're going to start with Change Healthcare. And Jessica, I'm going to start with you. Talk a little bit about what's the story here. Give us a little background and dive into it a little bit if you can.
Yeah, so this one is crazy. I was telling Dan before we started that I definitely went down the rabbit hole on this one and was really struggling with what level of detail to put in the tech briefing document. So basically, for anyone who's not aware at this point, Change Healthcare is a subsidiary of Optum Health, which is then a subsidiary of the United Health Group. So they have software that helps with back office, insurance filings. A lot of pharmacies rely on their more than 100 applications to get permission to fill prescriptions, or some hospitals use it for scheduling surgeries, that kind of stuff, right? So, just slightly impactful that this stuff has been down for over a week at this point. So on, last Wednesday, UHG filed an 8K with the SEC saying we have an incident. Not a lot of information in there other than they said it's a nation state actor. There has been ongoing status updates on an Optum status page that I linked to in the write-up. Basically, they're still trying to recover, but it looks like it was, at this time, we think it was BlackCat delivering their ransomware. They're also known as ALPH-V through the ConnectWise vulnerability that was announced early last week. So quick turnaround on this. There was some question whether it was Lockbit or BlackCat. I think it's been landed on BlackCat at this point. It doesn't really matter. It's still ransomware and it's still very impactful. At the end of the day, people aren't able to get their prescriptions that they need. TRICARE has fallen back to manual processes for serving military members and getting them the healthcare that they need. We're still at a place where we don't know when they're going to come back up. And, it's really a lesson on having BCP in place, testing those processes, and also a lesson on just how interconnected everything is. This is just one company, and it has completely brought the system to its knees on being able to, CVS and Walgreens weren't able to fill prescriptions. Smaller pharmacies, are still having problems getting approval for prescriptions. So it's been, really challenging from that perspective. And I think really a lesson in, let's do tabletops. Let's identify those follow-on effects that we may not be thinking of if, XYZ vendor goes down for weeks at a time. So Dave, I'll turn it over to you.
Quick question in the chat too, Dave. You want to incorporate was it a 0-day or 1-day intrusion? Like, would fast patching have helped in this case? I know, ransomware actors are increasingly opportunistic with the 0 days and the vulnerabilities they're using. But yeah, Dave, go ahead and if that falls into your answer, so be it.
Well, I think it has to be. I think this is. It does feel like we're broken records sometimes talking about ransomware. I mean, I think we have to admit this in the security industry, but Sometimes they're really bad because it's things like healthcare organizations.
Mhm.
But sometimes, and this is definitely one of those where I think it's worth talking about, but because not only that, I mean, it's the ripple effect. It's, this is a huge technology firm, right? This is not just, say, one healthcare location. This is a firm that provides services to innumerable other providers, and you're disrupting an entire chain. And so it's a supply chain problem too, right? There's a lot of
Mhm.
factors that I think are really important to sort of call out here. But in regard to the question, I haven't seen explicit telemetry that's come out of this. I mean, I know there's been some forensic work. I mean, and to Jessica's point, there was some sort of argument as to whether it was ALFV or whether it was Lockbit, and the general consensus seems to be ALFV and BlackCat at this point. But in terms of those ConnectWise flaws being compromised, I haven't seen whether it occurred like immediately or whether they had like a short delay. My sense is they didn't have them sitting out there. This wasn't something that sat there for months and months or weeks and weeks or something like that. It was short, but I mean, how soon is soon enough to patch? I think this is another question that's linked to this discussion, because we're talking about the immediacy of, initiating patch responses and configuration responses. And what it shows me, and this is not pointing fingers. I really, I think we're having this conversation so often now that it's worth calling out the fact that very few organizations are equipped to do like immediate level patching scenarios. And, first off, getting the notifications from the vendors and finding out, hey, we have a problem. I think I mean, if I'm taking a stab here, I don't know all the ins and outs, and I think there's more that's probably going to come from this. But I always look at this and say, okay, how did it happen? And we're pretty sure that it came through those ConnectWise vulnerabilities. But how many
Which were described,
organizations?
sorry, Dave, they were described as embarrassingly easy to exploit. You don't
Yeah,
always
yeah. I
see that
mean,
language around these things, right?
Well, yeah, yeah, and that's fair. But it's like, look, if let me put on my, consulting hat here, and I go in and I say, okay, give me a complete system inventory, not only of everything you've got, but everything that allows remote access and everything that's exposed on the internet. Can you do that right now? A lot of large organizations can't pull that off easily. This goes way down the rabbit hole. Are people equipped to say, okay, we just got a notification from the ISAC, or we just got a notification from law enforcement, or we just got a notification from the vendor that there's an immediate 0 day circulating in the wild. You need to stop everything you're doing and rush to the patch battle stations.
Mhm.
That sounds great if you know where to go and what to do immediately, but very few are equipped to do this. And so I think, again, without knowing the exact answer to that question, there's some takeaways here, right? I mean, everybody should be able to point to the things that could facilitate remote access and you should put those things on the absolute highest alert. There
Mhm.
shouldn't be ambiguity with regard to this.
Yeah, and keep in mind, we just went through this rapid patching remediation for Avanti, what, 2 weeks before this, from the CISA announcement. We're seeing a lot of
Move
this on the
it,
remote,
move
right?
it.
Right. I mean, we're having to be better about this. And also, Change Healthcare was an acquisition in October 2022. So actually not that long ago. I mean, it takes a long time with these big companies to do a full integration. So even if United Healthcare or Optum has the best security program on the earth, they did a recent acquisition, and getting the inventory and rolling out your awesome processes to that acquisition also takes time and energy and resources, and it's hard to do quickly.
Good point. A few points in the chat here. Just I'll try to group them a little bit. Someone's asking about nation state attacker and how companies use that on a regular basis. I think in this case, my speculation is that the initial filing maybe speculated it was nation state, but more like sort of became known that it was a ransomware group, or there was just blurred lines there or something like that. People have attributed BlackCat to different nation states and things like that too. But
Yeah, and I think
yeah, go
also
ahead.
it comes from a lack of cyber savviness on the people writing these, right? Like everyone says it was a sophisticated nation state
Yeah,
attack,
true.
because then that gives us a little bit of like, it's not our fault kind of thing, right?
Yeah, good point. And then a couple others talking about patching. Chris says you have to test the patches before you deploy. It's more of an architecture issue. Scott talks about in the SMB space, patch fatigue is setting in from the business. And it becomes a little harder to do this. Any sort of words of wisdom around those?
Automate wherever you can. Um, it's just going to keep coming. Yeah, and I think we're going to see this in a lot of the remote administration, remote access tools. I think 2024 is going to be the year of that. And automate wherever you can on your patching to help relieve some of that fatigue.
Yeah, and then there's a lot to say there, but I mean, I'll throw in an anecdote from personal experience. Right smack dab in the middle of the pandemic in 2020, my brother-in-law, who's an attorney and runs a legal firm in Florida, had this exact thing happen. Right, they actually got ransomware, and it came through remote access, but they had a third party that maintained it, and everybody was pointing fingers and so forth. And so it's like I agree 100%. I think SMB is going to be an issue. I think that's certainly one of the next sort of frontiers. Number two, I think there's a lot of remote access that people just aren't paying as much attention to as they should be, whether it's for file sharing, whether it's for like full-blown remote access, even for things like VDI access. And those things should be absolutely as locked down as possible. But I saw the comment that said, hey, you got to do this patch testing. I think there's a delicate balance there. It's tough because if you use that for critical, operations, people are very sort of hesitant to just jump in and patch without knowing the ramifications or whether it could just, stop all the business. It's tough. It's a very hard problem.
So in that case, then back to the sort of the resilience point, right? In the tabletopping, right? Like almost assume it's going to happen because these actors are getting more and more, sophisticated and or timely in their exploits. So, the continued focus on business continuity and resilience and tabletops, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Point to Sasha in here talks about little chance of the ransom being paid. What's the motivation of the actor? I have seen things. I remember when BlackCat was temporarily disrupted in December, they sort of came back and said, well, we're going to retaliate by going after critical infrastructure. And I know CISA and the FBI have warned that they're targeting hospitals specifically. So definitely could be, part of that sort of retaliation point there. But, the targets that have the most to lose are the ones they're going to go after typically, right?
Yep.
So,
Yep, absolutely.
any final words there? Or?
No, I think you probably nailed it. I mean, these are not nice people. And, obviously they're very well funded. And, some of the commentary that's been out in the space, I mean, I know Jessica's seen this, probably everybody that's hanging out with us today has seen this. They're pulling in millions and millions and millions. I mean, they're a huge industry at this point in their own right. I mean, just BlackCat, they're probably pretty resilient themselves. And I think law enforcement, even international cooperation, is going to be hard. They're going to be tough to take out. And,
these aren't amateurs in their, quote unquote, mom's basement, that are doing this for the lulz, right? I mean, this isn't actually, these people go to work and do this. This is their job that they do.
Yeah, it's a great way to put it. Final point from Mike here on patching. Valuable metric for departments' critical systems is minimum time to patch a critical vulnerability and plan accordingly. We definitely have some content on the Lions portal around that. A lot of vulnerability management and patch management content. So take a look there too. A lot of folks have chimed in on that. So cool. Certainly plenty to talk about there. We may have to cover it again next week. We'll see. Kind of what
How
happens
quickly it
next
comes
few
up.
days. Yeah, exactly. But let's move to topic 2 if we can. I want to talk a little bit about iSuit. So this leak came out on GitHub, sort of shining a light on the China hackers for hire system that they have to, help with their nation state attacks for espionage, for intel collection, all that good stuff. Dave, you want to talk a little bit about this and sort of give us an overview and kind of what your takeaways are?
Yeah, absolutely. So first, this is my shocked face at learning this. Come on. We sort of all knew that this was going on. This is just confirmation. China's business model is hack and steal. Right. I mean, it's a known thing. They've like profited significantly from stealing from technology firms, from really everybody, and trying to get ahead, right? There's no shortage of like manufacturing operations within China that are just churning out cheap knockoffs of things and so forth. So I mean, this is right in their wheelhouse, is to have this sort of distributed web of hackers for hire, as they're sort of saying here. But what I think is kind of interesting. I mean, China has not been kind to even business owners, right? If you look at Jack Ma, as one of the true billionaires that's done a lot of things for China, they didn't treat him well, and they're still not treating him well. And what I always wonder, you read about this, and it's like, oh, it's out of patriotism. I don't know that it is. I think it's out of fear. I think that China's government largely rules through fear and through intimidation. And I think they get a lot of really skilled people, and they probably fund them, but there's very likely some threats in the background, and I've actually even heard this from some friends that do intelligence professionally, that, they're coerced into doing a lot of this stuff. So motivation is kind of an interesting topic around this, but my guess is that, there's a staggering quantity of this going on, and there's a whole sort of underground marketplace to facilitate all those operations for the theft that's going on. So if you look at some of the things that they came out with the iSoon sort of revelation that was discovered out on GitHub leaks, it's a huge variety. It's a very wide and dispersed group of companies that they've gained access to, that they're selling. It's technology plans. It's anything under the sun. And I think what they basically have in place, and I think we'll hear more about this. I think this is the very tip of the iceberg. I'm kind of excited to see where it goes, because it'd be nice to know that we've sort of cracked this thing open, and that we're going to start getting more intel around what I look at as almost like a pyramid scheme with the government, right? Like, hey, here's the layer of hackers that are going to do the distribution and sort of almost brokering of this technology information and other information to the manufacturing firms, to whoever else, in order to try to keep ahead. I think everybody's in on this, but I don't think it's all because these are bad people scheming against the US or scheming against everybody else. I think it is the business model for the Chinese government, period. And it absolutely affects everybody that is on this call right now, right? There's no doubt whatsoever that every single one of us could potentially be a target, because they're opportunistic. It's a perfect example. It's not just targeted hacking. They want to improve business and commerce, and anybody that has anything to do with making money, they're going to look at you.
Points. Jessica, any thoughts? How can orgs and security teams make this actionable, these leaks, or the info that they're gaining from this?
Yeah, so I mean, that's a great question, right? So I think we've all known that China does this, right? Like, again, not here's my shocked face, right? I think the level of detail that we found out of here, like, they are looking at information that would help them for a military campaign in Taiwan, for example. We know in the next couple of years, there's probably going to be some kind of, conflict there. They don't have a great human rights record, and they're, monitoring minorities like, Uyghurs and that kind of thing. And they're also, looking for things that they don't deem socially acceptable, pornographic habits and gambling addiction and that kind of thing. And it also comes on the heels of the FBI, 2 weeks ago, saying, they're attacking our critical infrastructure. They are in. I mean, I think the last tech briefing I did, we were talking about, that announcement. And so I think what there has to be is a realistic reckoning and understanding of, this isn't just FUD, right? This isn't just like, woo, the Chinese are out there and they're going to get us, right? Like, this is actually real, and it's happening. And we have hard evidence now, especially with the iSoon links and the information from the FBI about our critical infrastructure. And so the things that you can do are to continue to beef up your defenses. Make sure that you know what normal looks like in your environment so that you can respond to abnormal. Don't install hardware that comes from China. Don't do Huawei, for example. They're saying that They even have like, I have this battery pack on my desk. It's from Anchor, but make sure they were modifying those so that when you plugged in your phone to charge, you were getting, malware on your phone unbeknownst to you. And then you're connecting to your work to do, things on your phone because you're a good employee and want to get things done. And so, look at where your hardware is coming from. Everything from your your home router, your Wi-Fi router, to the battery packs you're using, those kinds of things. Don't buy this technology from China.
It actually reminds me, if I could just, but you're exactly right. I was thinking when I was reading all about this, if anybody remembers the old Pony Express drop boxes, and when they came out with the first version of the Pwn plug, and then they, came out with this version of the Pwn plug that was basically a power strip. And when I read that, it brought me right back, and I'm like, people are buying power strips that, I mean, come on, every one of us has something like that that says made in China, in our homes,
Absolutely.
all over the place. And it's like, now you're looking at your power strip, like, side eye. Sadly, if you're a business, I think you got to start with, okay, what's the likely culprit? I mean, this is a big, big, big challenge.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we're going to be needing to talk about this a lot. I mean, yeah, Huawei is kind of the like Captain Obvious one.
Mm-hmm.
Like, okay, nothing blinky and racks. Let's start there. But I mean, if I can't plug into a power strip anymore, the world has gone crazy.
Yeah.
Good point. I want to circle back on one question just from the Change Healthcare. We had a question about tabletops for to inform internal employees. How would you facilitate those? Just PowerPoint decks, or would you mock drill it with employees, like put something on the network and do a fictitious attack? I think it's an important point if either of you wants to take the lead on that.
I would start with a tabletop exercise so that you're not being disruptive to your business. If you need help with that, there are any number of IANS faculty that are more than willing to do a write-up, do consulting, that kind of thing for that. I wouldn't necessarily do a fictitious attack to start with. And depending on the maturity of your organization, I don't know that I would ever do a fictitious attack to tabletop this.
I'll chime in and say, in that particular use case, I think that's a great question. Incidentally, I
Mm-hmm.
think everybody's a little nervous about these kinds of things happening. To me, I would extend that. I don't know that you want to do a mock attack. I like mock attacks if you can pull it off. They take a lot of planning. And I put the stress on mock attack. We're not trying to take stuff down, really. We're just trying to demonstrate the sort of, process set that comes in afterward. But I absolutely think the time is now to do a mock emergency patch, right? You get intel, set
That's
something
a
up
great
ahead of
idea.
time that's a mock system. It's not really serving customers or anything like that, but it emulates that capability set. And let's get some metrics going. Let's say, what's the expectation? Do we have the, sort of lightning team to jump in and get it done? Whatever you got now, it needs to probably be faster.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no better time than to, use that as an impetus to get the operational side improving.
Yep.
Yeah, it's a great point. Awesome. Thanks for circling back to that. All right, so we have about 5 or 6 minutes left. Let's hop to NIST CSF if that works for both of you. Jessica, you want to take the lead on this? What's the story here?
Yeah, I'm so excited for this. So, NIST CSF was originally put forth through an executive order a decade ago. 1.1 came out a little while after that, but we've been largely operating on this CSF version 1.1. And so, after years of work and organization and public comments that were definitely taken into account, NIST CSF 2.0 was announced on Monday and released. And there is so much great stuff in here. NIST released a number of tools that you can use to help you with doing assessments against the new framework or the updated framework. They introduced a sixth pillar called govern. It was kind of buried in the other pillars before, but now it's been brought out as its own pillar. Summer Fowler did a great webinar yesterday. If you weren't able to catch it, please go and take a look at it. She broke down the new govern pillar and the different controls under there. And she mapped if one of the controls came from a previously existing control in one of the other pillars, and then also what was net new, and then talked about those net new. I'm really excited about this. I think that, if you're looking to do a CSF assessment, that you should definitely be using 2.0. I love that govern is its own kind of encompassing pillar now. I think that's really important. They also beefed up stuff around supply chain, which I think is clearly very important. Everything we're seeing the last couple of years. So really great stuff here. And again, if you didn't catch Summer's webinar yesterday, go find the recording because it was amazing.
Yeah, a few folks asking about that. So that will be up on the IANS portal. And also we can link to it in the write-up for the tech briefing as well. So keep an eye out for that. Dave, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, I mean, I'm going to echo everything that was just said, because, I mean, really, if you go back to the previous version of the CSF, govern was scattered everywhere. It really was. One of the things that I thought was really good in this sort of new govern, sort of section is that there's a lot more emphasis on legal and compliance teams and their interrelationships. Which I think is important. I mean, down deep, we all know that that's a major factor now, especially with some of the new like SEC requirements. I mean, there's all these factors that are really starting to coalesce. And I think they captured some of that. And look, to be fair, they really did a good job of capturing feedback from the community that largely led to some of these things coming about in the new standard. And it's good to, they're listening. That's fantastic. There's more focus on continuous improvement and some resilience factors. So if you look within the protect pillar, they really tried to emphasize the fact that, hey, it's not just about protecting, it's about making sure that your protective capability sets, whether controls or processes, are getting better. And they also talk a lot more about outcomes, right? And some of the outcomes that should be expected, sort of related to maturity. And so this is a move forward, honestly, for I think the whole industry. I mean, I'm sort of, I'll call it neutral with regards to frameworks. I kind of understand you use what's best for you or what somebody mandates that you use in different cases. But I just see the CSF being really something a lot of organizations can gravitate towards. And I know, Jessica, you said the same thing about better alignment. I mean, there's a lot more alignment here with other frameworks. And people need that alignment. But even organizations that aren't, sort of under a regulatory umbrella want something. They want to say, hey, how do I compare to everybody? Are we doing the right things in a variety of categories? Nobody wants to feel like they're just adrift out there.
Right.
And so they're going to go to something. This is as good as it gets right now, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I'll also point out that the original NIST CSF was aimed at critical infrastructure, right? There's now this explicit recognition that more companies, even globally, who aren't, a NIST umbrella in the United States, are using CSF as a baseline framework. And I agree with Shaq. I mean, it is as good as it gets right now. I'm really pleased to see the updates. I'm excited for it. And also the supporting materials that were released at the same time. There are now examples out there that you can reference. There are, tools to use to help you do your self-assessment. There's just so much great stuff that came out of this update.
I'm going to call out one thing if I can. And I really want to hear what Jessica has to say about this. Not to put you on the spot, but did you happen to see the new change that came in that sort of implies that for third parties, you're going to need to apply the same policies that you have internally to some of the suppliers that you're using? And I've had a lot of people ask me, like, how in the world are you going to make that work? I don't know. I think it's a big gray area right now.
So as someone who has a team or works with a team that has to answer client questionnaires because we are a supplier of software, companies are trying this already with not great success. GRC teams push back wherever they can that's great that's your policy. That's not our policy. Or here's where we're not in alignment. And you're going to have various companies, even at the large enterprise, that are not going to be aligned on what the policy and the threshold should be. And so you're putting suppliers in a really tough position because they're going to have this policy and that policy and this policy and that policy. And so
Yeah.
I don't think that's realistic at the end of the day.
Fair. So yeah, Larry, yes, please do. We will. So yeah, Jessica, Dave, thanks so much today. Appreciate the time. We are over time. So thanks again. A lot of topics here today. Great stuff. And let's do this again soon.
Yeah, sounds great.
Yeah.
Thanks. Have a
Awesome.
great time.
Thanks, everybody.
See ya. Bye.